All right, and we are live with episode 11 of a podcast for all seasons. Had a couple week hiatus, had some other things going on, but we are now back with a vengeance. Here to talk about some upcoming movie and comic book news and whatnot. I'm going to turn it over to my co-host Eric Joseph. Eric, what's going on?
Hi, Josh. I'm doing all right, and hello, everybody at home. This is Eric Joseph of DarkKnightNews.com, ComicBookMovie.com, and Multiverse Entertainment. And today we are talking mostly about the recently announced Justice League movie, along with Batman vs. Superman and other news that popped up late last week to last weekend. We thought that, there's just so these are announcements we've been waiting for a while, and we couldn't not talk about them, especially since we haven't done a show in a few weeks. But before we get to what we are going to talk about, I just want to mention I wrote an article, a brief one, over at Dark Knight News earlier today. If you're in the Metro Detroit area and you would like to see the Legends of the Night documentary film that talks about Batman fans and what the character really means to them, they're doing a showing 2 weeks from today. It will be May 15th at the AMC Livonia 20. Now, you have one more week to buy tickets, and if you want more information about this event, you can find a link to it on our Facebook page for a podcast for all seasons, or just go to darkknightnews.com. As of this recording, it's the most recent article. But go there, it'll tell you a little bit about the showing, click the link, and it will tell you what you need to do to get tickets for this event. I think it's through like some kind of site called TUG, T-U-G-G, but proceeds will go to the Children's Leukemia Foundation of Michigan. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called, but that's if I messed up the name, that is what the purpose of the foundation is. So go hang out with some Bat fans and know that your money's going to a good cause. Anyway, we're about to talk Justice League now. As we know, Batman vs. Superman, or whatever it may be called, they still don't have an official title. But shooting is about to get underway in Detroit. Recently, they confirmed that camera tests have begun, which is cool. There was recently an audition for extras in Troy where Warner Brothers had to cut the line after 7,000 people, but I'm sure there's going to be plenty of auditions for extras in this movie because they were really only looking for a set type of people in this latest open call. But the first bit of big news came, I believe it was Thursday or Friday of last week, and Ray Fisher, mostly known as a stage actor, was cast in the role of Victor Stone / Cyborg. And he's probably going to have a small role in Batman Superman, but it was said to build toward an ongoing series of DC movies, and just a few days later, on Sunday night, we got the announcement via the Wall Street Journal that Zack Snyder, director of Man of Steel and Batman Superman, will direct Justice League. So in a way, Superman's new trilogy has been hijacked by the rest of the DCU. On one hand, we kind of wish Superman got to have more great movies, but on the other, Josh can also attest to this. These are the movies we've been waiting for our lives. The technology's there now. The audience is there. It's overdue. Let's just get to it. And so far, from this we can surmise the Justice League will consist of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, Cyborg, and maybe a few others. And before I get into my speculation on other members of the league, I'm going to turn it over to Josh now. Josh, your opinions on the recent news concerning Batman, Superman, and Justice League, your speculation on what heroes and villains we can expect to see down the line, where you'd like to see the franchise to go, all that jazz.
Well, I wasn't extremely excited about the Cyborg announcement. The only reason I wasn't is I think that if we're really going to bring a big character like Cyborg into the fray, unknowns work in certain regards. Granted, some people, they've said you can't see Superman as another actor playing Superman. It hurts the character of Superman, and there's some validity to that. And we've pretty much had unknowns in that role, or at least not extremely popular actors in the role. Henry Cavill had a little bit of work, and as did Chris Reeves, but I think they're going to go on and define themselves in that role, and then do other work as well, as those two actors did and have. But I think that a character like Vic Stone's Cyborg is a little lesser known, and bringing in a known actor, some people speculated maybe Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, was going to get that role. Maybe I know that Shamar Moore, who is known from, I believe, Criminal Minds, he did the voice acting for the Cyborg in an animated film. Some people had even speculated he would be good for the role. There were some other prominent black actors who definitely could fill those shoes pretty well. So it's interesting that they decided to go with an unknown. Again, I don't know how much that character is actually going to be in the film. There's a lot of speculation. Me and Eric have been talking about it as well. But we know that Gal Gadot has been cast as Wonder Woman / Diana of Themyscira, or whatever they decide to call her, Diana Prince. We don't know to what level her character is going to be developed in this film. Now, we do assume that there's going to be a significant amount of character development for Bruce Wayne's Batman, played by none other than Ben Affleck. But I don't think that we're really going to get a very significant amount of character development for either Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman or Vic Stone's Cyborg, played by the new actor that they just cast, whose name I again cannot remember to save my life.
Right.
Yeah, I've heard the name a dozen times, and then they made the cast announcements for Star Wars this week, and I have all these new names in my head, and I'm just having trouble differentiating between all the new casting news that's been released. That's some other information that we could talk about maybe later, but and I think that they're going to maybe play very minor roles. I think that if we look at, say, Iron Man 2's Black Widow, very, very minute character development for Natasha Romanoff, played by Scarlett Johansson. They introduced the fact that she's a badass and that she's kind of a spy, that she works for S.H.I.E.L.D., or at least works with S.H.I.E.L.D., and they brought her into the fore in Avengers. I think that that's a really smart way to introduce the characters, but there's more than one way to skin a cat, especially if you have a smart enough writer. I think that they're going to come up with inventive ways to introduce those characters and bring them to the fore, and decide how much development they actually want to do. I think that first and foremost it should be a Superman film. If only secondary, it should be a Superman-Batman film, and then I think thirdly it should be a vehicle that develops potential franchises in the Justice League film that's also been announced. So that's the second big thing on the plate is the Justice League announcement. They announced that Zack Snyder is going to be doing the Justice League film as well. He'll be directing that. So that's pretty big news. Some people were unhappy, and I think it's really humorous. It seems as though a lot of what I can only call Marvel fanboys, if you go on any forum and they're talking about it, it seems like people who like Marvel, they are all too eager to bash the information. They seem to jump on the Joss Whedon train the second he was announced for Avengers, although Joss Whedon's large character casts have been largely unsuccessful, with rare exception. I like some of the things that Joss Whedon's done, but Firefly, Dollhouse, and several other failures
I wouldn't say
notwithstanding.
largely.
I'm sorry, what was that, Eric?
I wouldn't say largely successful.
Well, no, I mean maybe not largely successful, but he definitely he's very successful at building cult franchises, and that can't be overstated. You can't have 13 episodes of a short-lived sci-fi franchise turn into a cult following unless it is truly an exceptional thing. If only if it's exceptional in hindsight, in Firefly, for example, and then spawn a movie in Serenity. I think that the Buffy and the Angel thing is a very rare exception to the Joss Whedon's portfolio. However, he's definitely been successful with Avengers. It can't be denied. I mean, it's like the third most successful film of all time. I think, not accounting for inflation. So that's extraordinarily impressive. The guy knows comic books. The guy writes comic book stuff pretty well. He definitely understands the gravitas of comics. He understands that there is some lightheartedness that can be done in comics and done well. He understands the characters well enough, it seems, and therefore he did a good job with Avengers. If people think that Zack Snyder doesn't understand comics, well, then they just don't know who Zack Snyder is, because this is the guy who did 300 to absolute perfection. It was one of the best comic adaptations outside of, say, Rodriguez's Sin City, and the only other exception would be his Watchmen film, and that is a character ensemble film that was so ludicrously faithful to the comic books. Anybody who doesn't like that film is either just like Alan Moore themselves and is just predisposed to not liking it, or they're making the ridiculous argument that no comic fan has ever made, which is it's too faithful to the comic book. And he did an excellent job in terms of visualizing that film, developing all of the characters individually, having them all come together. Granted, it's not the same type of team as a Justice League or an Avengers, but Watchmen definitely is, I think, granted it wasn't an extraordinarily financially successful film, it definitely was, in my opinion, it was critically well done, and it proves that Zack Snyder can handle a large cast in like a Justice League movie. I would like to see some other developments, and we do know that The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, is indeed talking to Warner Brothers to have some role, and we just don't know what it is yet. So maybe that is going to be a Justice League movie. Maybe he's going to play a character in the Justice League or a villain. What are your thoughts on that? What do you think is coming next as far as announcements from DC? Because they have a lot of projects on the boat.
Well, the first announcement I think will be coming. I still kind of think that there's another villain for Man of Steel. We've talked about Doomsday ad infinitum on this show in previous episodes, and recently I'm kind of wondering, is he going to be in Man of Steel, because Zack Snyder was talking about Batman kind of being the big opponent for Superman in it. But when I was thinking about the casting call, there were two types of people they wanted. They wanted clean-cut executive types, so we're thinking, maybe LexCorp, Wayne Enterprises extras, but they also wanted military types, and I'm thinking, what role will the military have in this movie? Will we, in fact, have Doomsday? As for Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, he has said that the character he's playing hasn't been played before, and it's someone as powerful as Superman. But when we analyze who those characters would be, a lot of the obvious choices have been played on television, but a lot of people might not necessarily count those appearances. Cyborg, played by Ray Fisher in the new series of movies, we remember that character was also portrayed on Smallville. Martian Manhunter is the character I'm leaning toward who Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is playing. It's a character as powerful as Superman, and I really see him playing a hero. I don't necessarily see him as someone like Darkseid. It's possible he's Doomsday, but I think they really want him in a big role, and I think it's in Justice League. Bill Jet Ramey from Batman on Film on Facebook recently said, from what he's heard, the on-film Justice League will be Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Cyborg, and one more, probably Martian Manhunter, and that fits with what we've been thinking. Shazam is another possibility. I think Shazam is a good choice for The Rock, but he's obviously much more fitting from Black Adam, which you and I both strongly agree on. And we've seen from the Wall Street Journal article that Warner Brothers is keen on making a Shazam film eventually, but it doesn't look like it's going to be part of the connected DC universe, which is actually unfortunate. They have other, Metal Men and Vertigo movies, which I think Metal Men and Vertigo can absolutely be entities of their own, but I do think Shazam should be connected to the other films. Now, as far as it goes with Martian Manhunter, yeah, I really would like to see that character on screen. As for Gal Gadot and Ray Fisher's roles in Batman Superman, from what we've heard and talked about in the past, it will still be a Superman movie. We have the supporting characters like Lois and Perry, and Diane Lane is coming back as Martha Kent. And I think a lot of this is going to be, how do these other characters fit into the world of Man of Steel? But Batman will have a rather sizable role. Wonder Woman, we don't know. I do think it's going to be maybe something along the lines of Black Widow in screen time. However, Cyborg, we don't know if he's going to be Cyborg yet. He could just be Vic Stone. We know they filmed stuff for a football game, but that was well before Ray Fisher was cast. But they could just always add him in later, edit it all together, and it's going to be totally seamless. But I kind of think Victor Stone's involvement in the movie is going to be maybe as sizable as Hawkeye's was in the first Thor movie. Say, okay, here's Vic Stone. He is part of this universe. Get ready for Justice League. Justice League, however, which, by the way, the Wall Street Journal theorized that they don't see it getting here earlier than 2018, but people do admit it's entirely possible it could get here in 2017, depending on what the shooting schedule is. Nobody knows for certain if they're going to shoot Batman, Superman, and Justice League back-to-back or not. And it certainly would beat them to the punch, because ideally we would like Justice League to get here before Avengers 3, which assumedly would also be 2018. Now, I really think that Justice League is not going to be a Superman movie at its core like Batman Superman would be. We just have too much of an ensemble cast. It will be, of course, the world, how do these characters fit in the world of Man of Steel, but we're just going to be jumping character to character so much, possibly even establishing the origin of at least one or two of them, introducing a big villain, unless they do some kind of cliffhanger or stinger at the end of Batman Superman. But it's this third film in what we could call a Man of Steel trilogy is not going to be a Superman film at heart. Now, one thing I do want to touch on before we move on is when Avengers 3 gets here, we all assume it's 2018. I talked to you about this on the phone recently, Josh. Marvel phases tend to come in 5 or 6 films. The first phase, which was Iron Man, The Incredible Hulk, Iron Man 2, Thor, Captain America, The First Avenger, then Avengers, it was a 6-film phase. But now phase 2 is 5 films consisting of Iron Man 3, Thor the Dark World, Captain America the Winter Soldier, Guardians of the Galaxy, then Avengers Age of Ultron. Phase 3, so far we know, consists of Ant-Man, which will come after Avengers 2 in 2015. Then we have Captain America 3 in 2016, a mystery film that year, and then 2 mystery films from Marvel in 2017. I'm really thinking the rest of Phase 3, I think that Ant-Man I think we're going to get 2 established characters and 2 new characters. I really think beyond Ant-Man and Captain America 3, I think we're going to get Doctor Strange and Thor 3. We know Marvel is really wanting to get Doctor Strange on the big screen, and we saw the Easter egg, his name dropped in The Winter Soldier. But I'm wondering if 2017 possibly will Avengers 3 get here, because James Gunn, the director of Guardians of the Galaxy, says his film, which is going to have Thanos, who we believe is going to complete an Avengers trilogy of sorts, even though we know there are going to be certainly more Avengers films down the line. He said Guardians is going to have more to do with Avengers 3, so I'm wondering if that perhaps means that Avengers 3 will get here a little sooner than we think, and we're going to get that big Thanos lead in. But then that also, we're discussing villains. We discussed Doomsday for Batman Superman, but who does the Justice League fight? And everyone would love to see Darkseid. I certainly would. He's one of my favorite villains, period. But even though he came before Thanos, the mainstream would likely see Thanos as, well, Darkseid as a knockoff of Thanos, even though it was the other way around. We've seen Darkseid portrayed in kind of a different way on Smallville. He was CGI when you saw him in his purest form, but they kind of did a Final Crisis type interpretation where he would possess a vessel. Most notably Earth 2's Lionel Luthor in the series finale. But I'm not quite sure Darkseid's the way to go, even though the New 52 origin of Cyborg is tied into Darkseid and Apocalypse. I'm not quite sure that's what they'd want to do. Justice League needs to stand on its own 2 legs, and I'm not quite sure Alien Invasion's the way to go. We've already seen it in Avengers. We've seen it in Man of Steel. And I'm not even sure Brainiac would be the way to go, because that might still be Alien Invasion. I'd like to see more, perhaps Crime Syndicate, maybe even Injustice League / Legion of Doom. Any more ideas on your end, Josh?
Yeah, I was gonna interject there for a second. I just think that they have the unfortunate situation of just being late to the gate on this one, and granted, that much is painfully obvious to DC fans. It's unfortunately not painfully obvious to Warner Brothers. We've talked about the differentiation between DC and Warner Brothers. They're not one and the same entity like Marvel and Marvel Studios. Now Disney is, and they don't have as much input as far as what the Warner Brothers engine is pumping out. But they're late to the gate, and everyone sees it, and everyone knows it, and it seems like now they're trying to, quote-unquote, rush to catch up to the Avengers films. They're trying to pump out a Justice League film. I mean, it reminds me of this anecdote that I heard. I was watching some special features on one of the first Star Trek movie, the Star Trek the motion picture. And I'm a big Star Trek fan. I'm a big Star Wars fan. And while I was watching it, they were talking to the producers of Star Trek, and I think it was Paramount who actually distributed that. And Paramount, after Star Wars came out, said, "Man, this awesome epic space saga is making millions and millions and millions of dollars. It's one of the most successful blockbusters of all time. I wish we had something like that." And like the guy that he was talking to was a Star Trek fan, and he's like, Star Trek, it's only one of the most beloved syndicated shows of all time, and you could easily make Star Trek movies. You have an existing universe. You don't even have to pull, you don't even have to write original scripts, but you don't have to, introduce an entire set of characters in a film. You have already have a ground base of a devoted group of fans, and that's kind of what the DC Warner Brothers situation reminds me of. Is you have DC / Warner Brothers saying, man, that Avengers movie sure is making a lot of money. Gee, Marvel sure is making a lot of films. I wish we had superheroes that we could put on the screen. Oh, well, you can do, you know. Make a goddamn Justice League movie already. And, you know, you had the fans just chomping at the bit, waiting for them to put out a product, any product, really. I mean, unfortunately, the reality is they were so desperate to put out a product that I think that they honestly had the misstep of Superman Returns, and then they had the misstep of Green Lantern. Again, I like both films, but how do you build a franchise from those films? You know, the Green Lantern especially was, you know, critically unsuccessful to the point that they don't feel as though they're going to touch that. And it's very, very sad that Green Lantern is probably not going to be a film again for a long period of time, because it would basically be like this: is we know that Iron Man's a great character. We know that he is making for some really great films in Avengers and the Iron Man movies themselves. And it'd be like if the first Iron Man movie wasn't successful and they just said, well, I guess people don't like that character enough. We're just not going to make any more Iron Man films. It would be utterly devastating to Iron Man fans and people who know that the character can be great, and that's how every Green Lantern fan on the planet feels at this point. But the point being that you're really going to have these characters that need to be introduced, and they're getting so late to the game that it now feels as though they are just stumbling over their own feet, trying to, you know, pour on that extra speed to catch up. And speaking of extra speed, we wanted to talk about Flash and Green Lantern as well, and how they might play into this universe. What are your thoughts on that, Eric?
Well, you started to touch on it with Green Lantern not being the success that Warner Brothers wanted it to be. I believe that probably was their first attempt at wanting to build a larger DC universe. It didn't work, so then Man of Steel became that jumping point. A lot of people are like, oh, they're going to do another Green Lantern movie within the next few years and it's going to be a reboot. No, I don't think that's going to happen at all. Warner Brothers probably thinks Green Lantern had its chance. We spent a shit ton of money on it. We had visual effects people working basically down to the wire to get this film out on time. They put a lot, despite the fact that there were too many cooks in the kitchen and it wasn't the GL movie we all wanted. And like Josh, I agree. I do like Green Lantern. Not as much, it's not the greatness it could have been, but I do believe it's an enjoyable film. But when it fails like that and they put so much man-hours into it, they're not going to want to do another one, which calls into question, do they even want to include a Green Lantern in this movie? Ryan Reynolds has said he likely is never coming back again. It's just not going to happen. So I don't, if they do by some chance include a Green Lantern, it's not going to be Hal Jordan. Jon Stewart's the next logical choice because he's in the public consciousness from the Justice League cartoons. But I still have a hard time believing that he's going to be in it because the average moviegoer might say, oh, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern? Why do I want to see a movie with a Green Lantern in it? You know, as unfortunate as that sounds, you have to acknowledge the truth in what I just said. As for The Flash, it's hard to think of the Justice League as well without a Flash or a Green Lantern. But I'm not so sure they'll include him either because he's got a TV series. And while Superman Returns came out while Smallville was on the air, there's really only one known iconic Superman, and that's Clark Kent. And the movie somehow happened. But with The Flash, if we have a Flash in the movie franchise, it's obviously not going to be Grant Gustin, who's playing him on the CW show. And I've read things whereas WB has Flash on the TV screen for a reason, and he's not going to be on the big screen. That I can actually see, holding him back from being in a movie. However, with Green Lantern, there have been multiple Flashes. We could easily have Barry Allen on a TV show and let's say Wally West in the motion pictures. I think that could be a way to go. I just but we can't have too many characters in the Justice League ensemble. People are bitching about Batman, Superman, saying, "Oh, Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, now Cyborg, too many characters in one movie." Oh, but then you look at the Avengers. You weren't complaining when you had Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, Hawkeye. Now in the sequel, you're bringing them back and you're adding Quicksilver, Scarlet Witch, and the Vision to the fold. That Now that is a lot of characters. Now, Justice League, I really do think they need to make it 5, 6 characters. And having Martian Manhunter in there is cool. We've established 4 characters on the lineup, but I really think there needs to be, at bare minimum, a Flash or a Green Lantern. Both probably won't make it in, but we even saw in the recent animated feature, JLA Adventures Trapped in Time, which you and I watched about a couple months ago when we were hanging out. That lineup, I believe off the top of my head, was Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Robin, The Flash, Green Lantern, not Green Lantern, Cyborg, and Aquaman. So we had a movie free of Green Lantern. It wasn't the greatest Justice League film. It was better more for younger audiences, but the lineup they had cohesively worked and everyone had their spots. But we had Flash, who is often thought of as a core member, like I've been saying, but unfortunately the film focused too much on Legionnaires, Dawnstar, and the Karate Kid. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Josh, but we're about to finish up our Justice League thoughts in a bit, but anything you'd like to say about Flash and GL before we move on to discussing comics, or any other points you'd like to bring up, and also that bit, just for listeners at home, would you also agree that Dawnstar and Karate Kid overshadowed the Justice League in a movie that was supposed to be about them?
Yeah, I understand why they did that. I mean, it was kind of, I think it was the idea that, hey, the Justice League proper is fairly well known. Let's introduce them to a couple other. Let's use kind of this as a backdoor to introduce the Legionnaires as a whole, and also let's introduce a couple of the more interesting Legionnaire characters. But I think it's really, really funny when the B and the C guys or the D guys are the guys who are fighting this great universal threat, but you're going to tell me that, Superman and Green Lantern and Batman and Martian Manhunter and Wonder Woman and all these other, the absolute A-plus listers, they can't take them down. It actually reminds me of, I think it was a Kurt Russell movie. It was a kids film. I think it might have been done by Disney, called Sky High, and it's like basically all the A-lister superheroes at this high school made for superheroes, all the A-listers get taken down, and it's like the girl whose power is turning into a gerbil and a guy who can turn into a puddle of water. Like, they're the guys who end up saving the day, and it was just like, it's kind of, I understand rooting for the underdog, but it's kind of hilarious when you kind of say, okay, if Iron Man and the Hulk and all these other awesome characters, Thor and so on and so forth, can't defeat the alien invasion, do you really think that the absolute D-listers of Marvels are going to come to the fore and they're going to fight these guys and take them down? No, absolutely not. Everyone's going to die. It's just realistic. But back to Flash potentially being in a Justice League film. I love the Flash. He's a core character. Just insanely common to see someone with a Flash T-shirt or a Green Lantern T-shirt. Even people who aren't what you would call comic book fans. It's just that character's kind of a pop culture character. Everyone knows the Flash. It's like, fastest man alive, Flash. Everyone does a little suit, fast man pose. You see, hints of him on, for example, Big Bang Theory, that's kind of pop culture's, kind of queer eye into, comic book culture. Granted, it's one half of it celebrating it and the other half of it heavily-handedly making fun of it. There was one episode I remember where they were all going to dress up as a superhero, and every single one of them dressed up as a Flash because they decided not to get together beforehand and consolidate what their ideas were going to be. So the Flash is a popular character. He's had a television show that was, it's kind of a cultish classic now. That's out on DVD and whatnot, but he's an excellent character. He opens up for a lot of possibilities. You need something done right this second on the other side of the planet. Well, the Flash has got it done already. You just asked him, and he tells you that it's done, and that's awesome. It does provide some storytelling problems, because how do you keep a character who can move at the speed of light from solving most of your issues in the shake of a lamb's tail? Unless it's just brute strength that's needed, and then, guess what, Superman or Martian Manhunter or whoever else steps in and they take over that role, and then, back to the Flash moving at warp speed. So it becomes a problematic as far as writing's concerned. I could see it being a problem, but they managed to do it in the comics plenty of times, and it is one of those questions that you're kind of going like, what's the Flash doing right now? Like, in this section in the comic book, like, isn't he done doing that other thing he was doing 25 minutes ago because he moves at the speed of light? They're always really inconsistent with his powers. Like, he's lightning fast in 1 second, and it's humorous almost for comic relief, and then other times, it takes him 3 minutes to run to Africa, and it's like, well, not really. He moves fast enough to travel around the world like 7 times before I finish to the sentence. But it would be cool. I understand that if they're going to do them in a show, that it's really not going to open it up for the possibility to do it in a film. It reminds me of why they would not allow the Smallville producers and writers to introduce Batman in that show, even though they really, really wanted to do it in a young Bruce Wayne kind of thing. He was tied up in movie rights and things like that, and we kind of thought that was ridiculous. And I could see for the average consumer saying, like, wait a minute, is this the same Batman that's on the Smallville show that I've been watching or that I've heard about? If you hear that there's a Flash television show and all of a sudden there's a Flash movie and they're not the same character, it is kind of weird. And Marvel's going to get a taste of that when Avengers comes out with one Scarlet Witch and one Quicksilver, and then X-Men film comes out and it has another one. They're about to get a taste of that strange weirdness that the average consumer is going to be weirded out by it. They're not going to understand, and you're going to have people doing what me and Eric always laugh about, saying, man, when are we going to see Spider-Man and the X-Men team up with the Avengers? I can't wait for that movie, not realizing that 3 different production houses all own those character rights. And
Avengers
talked
2?
about it times. Well, yeah, Avengers 2. I mean, that people keep expecting all these major characters to all come together, and we laugh about it pretty often, but Warner Brothers is in the same boat if they decide to do so many TV properties. Why are we never going to see Arrow in the Justice League, even though that would be totally awesome? Because he's on the show, and he doesn't need to be in films. His successful television show is... It's a critical darling. Everyone loves that show. Even it seems like they're quite enamored with the actor who's playing Arrow. They're quite enamored with the storytelling that they've been doing since season 1. And granted, the show may not be an absolute ratings powerhouse as far as the television's concerned. It's a ratings darling for CW, which isn't saying a whole lot. And I think that with those types of properties, they're writing themselves into a corner for trying to bring in at least the Flash into a Justice League movie. As far as why they won't bring back Green Lantern, I already spoke to that. Now, as far as Shazam is concerned, Shazam is currently in the Justice League lineup, or at least he has been in New 52. He also has been in various iterations of Justice League in the past. So why wouldn't they bring him in? The only reason that I could think of why they would not bring him in is because he is a very large character. And I think that they're going to have to bring in a large actor to fill that role. And I don't necessarily mean physically large, although he is going to have to be that as well. really he's two actors. He's got to be a child actor who's, I assume, is going to have to be a good, wholesome-looking child actor, young enough to be in a few films as Billy Batson, and not too old that he doesn't play as the young kid. And they have to have a actor who can play Shazam, aka Captain Marvel, and be him when he turns into the superpowered hero. And he's very much an analog of Superman, and I could see them not wanting to essentially steal, for lack of a better term, steal the thunder from Superman in a film where his power is what makes him such a standout character, his ability to do all of these things. Well, now you add a character who basically has all of his powers minus heat vision and add lightning powers, and you have Shazam. And so I could see why they might not want to bring him in, and I could see it being problematic for them to even make another film, because he's going to do what he's been doing since the character was introduced in the 40s. He's going to steal some of the audience from Superman because they're very close analogs. That's why DC sued the pants out of Fawcett City Comics back in the day. That's another story for another day, however. But Justice League, we're wrapping it. Bam! That's our thoughts. We're looking forward to it. Zack Snyder, I think, is going to do a great job. But we wanted to talk about a couple other things. Before we went on to other comics books, I wanted to maybe touch on Bryan Singer / Days of Future Past controversy going on. Eric, any other thoughts on Justice League before we get off of that?
I don't think "get off" was the proper term to use for making a segue to that subject. But yeah, I just had one more thought about Justice League when we're talking about quintessential characters in the lineup. I'm currently wearing a Justice League shirt that I bought at Kohl's, and Kohl's mainstream store in malls and strip malls all over America, I'm sure. And guess what 5 members are on it? Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, The Flash, and Green Lantern. And like we've been saying, 4 out of those 5 need to be in the movie. But as we go on to Days of Future Past, I don't have too many thoughts on it right now. We're likely going to do an episode centered around reviewing the film in the future of the X franchise later this month after we get to see it. But I'm not going to talk about the sexual scandal side of Bryan Singer, which I think we pretty much agreed we're not going to get into the specifics of that. But what we're talking about, folks, is much more how the scandal affects where the X franchise may go in the future. Well, more so who's going to be behind the camera, we should say. Bryan Singer has dropped out of some press appearances for Days of Future Past. No, of course, innocent until proven guilty. But when you have a scandal like this in Hollywood, even if you're innocent, some people are still going to believe it, and it's never going to go away. And X-Men Apocalypse, the next film in the franchise, is already dated for May of 2016. And, Apocalypse is a pretty big villain. That's already got people excited. We already know some details about the film. It's going to take place in the 80s and involve the First Class cast, which we know Michael Fassbender as Magneto, James McAvoy as Xavier, Jennifer Lawrence as Mystique, and is it Nicholas Hoult, whatever his name is, as Beast? Those are 4 that will be in Apocalypse, but we'll probably see other characters, maybe some New Mutants as well, though not to be confused with the title New Mutants in the what's also known as the X corner of the Marvel Universe, but we're just saying new characters introduced on screen. But we don't have too much to say, but I do think that since Apocalypse is coming out in 2 years, we have to hit the ground running as soon as we're done with press for Days of Future Past. I'm sure they've probably already got some sketches up. They've certainly already got ideas for the film, but Bryan Singer, will he... Josh and I don't think he's going to direct this film. Would he even be on as producer? He probably might get a story credit, but will the Bryan Singer name possibly attach a negative stigma. I don't think Days of Future Past's overall gross will be affected by this scandal. I mean, Bryan Singer guilty or not, I'm still going to see Days of Future Past and future X-Men films because Bryan Singer is not the only person who works on this behind the camera. There are many people who work hard. Then there are actors in front of the camera that we all love, and I'm seeing this as an X-Men fan. I'm very much looking forward to the movies we have in the pipeline. But I do think that we're likely to see a change in director because we've probably got to get pre-production, well planned, and that's probably got to have a lot done by the end of this year. And obviously, principal photography has to begin by, let's say, mid-2015 with enough room for post. They tend to do X-Men films rather quickly, actually, if you've seen production schedules. But, yeah, 2 years announcing the film, you have to really get this done quickly. But, yeah, I'm saying for now, I don't think Singer will be coming back as originally planned. Your thoughts, Josh?
Yeah, pretty much nailed most of what I was going to say. I mean, like we said, we're not going to touch on any of the allegations or anything like that. But I mean, as far as what they imply going forward with the X-Men franchise, that's pretty big development that's come up in the last couple of weeks. So we wanted to talk about it since we've been absent. I like most of what Bryan Singer's done. I really enjoyed Superman Returns, even though it wasn't the Superman film that necessarily all people wanted. I've liked some of the stuff that he's done in the past, Usual Suspects. I liked the X-Men films as well. And a lot of people were really, really excited about him coming back for Days of Future Past. That being said, however, if all this stuff comes out of the wash and he ends up going down for his crimes or something like that, if the allegations are true, then there's obviously going to be no future films with him involved in it. And on the other hand, if you have him completely being exonerated, like Eric said, there's going to be a significant amount of stigma that's still going to be placed on him, as things will happen in almost any criminal trial or any other type of public scandal. He's not going to come out with his hands clean. That's a really unfortunate thing for anybody who has to go through that type of thing. And obviously, if you're wealthy and you're in Hollywood, there's just so many more bullseyes on you. So he's got his work cut out for him as far as going forward from this point with the successful career. But what it means for the X-Men films is definitely the biggest concern, because they had already announced Age of Apocalypse, but the future X-Men film, and he's already backed out from press for Days of Future Past. So it's already affecting the franchise, if not in a minute way. I mean, what does it say for the film when the director decides to not do press for it? Well, he said, hey, I'm just not trying to bring this film down because so many other people have worked on it. There's a huge crew of cast and a large group of cast and crew, rather, to rephrase what I was going to say. And all of those people worked on the film as well. And then you had this one guy who was the director. Granted, that's a very big thing, but the guy could continue to have a career even if the allegations come out to be completely true. It doesn't really matter in some regards in Hollywood, and I think that I'll just point to Roman Polanski as the evidence of that. But that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on. Yeah, it's just an interesting thing. What's it going to do with the X-Men franchise? I guess we're going to have to wait and see, but we could really be getting very little input from Singer in the future X-Men movies. Maybe not even. Maybe he'll just stick to producing those films, and maybe that will be enough. He'll carry on his torch for that series in that way. But what else did you want to talk about, Eric? I know we got new comic books dropping, and we have this Saturday is National Free Comic Book Day. So those who didn't know that, this Saturday want to go out and get your free comic books at your local comic book store. What else we got, Eric?
Yeah, new comics are definitely what I wanted to talk about before we sign off for this week. Uh, we've had a growing tradition now at the end of our recent episodes to talk about new comics, and I think when we do this, it happens to fall on weeks where I really only buy one comic, and that happened again this week. I picked up only Batman Eternal #4, but man, is that series ever going strong. Just the intrigue with the whole the trial of Jim Gordon is upon us, the return of Carmine Falcone, what that means for Gotham City, and this corrupt new interim commissioner ordering the cops to hunt Batman. Lots of exciting stuff. This issue saw Dustin Nguyen on art. He's been a mainstay of various Batman titles. I think he probably holds the record of drawing cover art for the most #1 Batman titles. I should say #1 issue of various Batman titles, just from the short amount of years he's been drawing Batman. But you've known him from Batman Beyond and Detective and Streets of Gotham, and recently Lil Gotham. But this issue he contributed to Batman Eternal was perhaps some of his best looking work since the Streets of Gotham days. Just really good stuff. So pick it up if you get the chance. If you want to get something new off the rack, if you haven't stopped at your shop of choice, or if you go Saturday for free comic book day. As for other things I want to touch on, I have a review posted this week over at comicbookmovie.com of Green Lantern Volume 4 Dark Days. That was a great collection. I gave it an 8.5 out of 10. But we also have the review linked on our Facebook page for a podcast for all seasons. So there's a quick way to hunt the link down if you don't want to dig through review archives, even though it'll be a fairly recent one over there. But the first volume post Jeff Johns, the Robert Venditti era, just a really good read. Great art from Billy Tan. I think he's a great fit for Green Lantern. And certain artists just have a knack for certain characters. Like recently, we've seen, Tony Daniel draws Batman well, certainly draws Superman, Wonder Woman well. But is there anything really Tony Daniel doesn't draw well? But Jason Fabok and David Finch, recent artists on Batman, just great artists for finding the essence of those characters, the tone, the atmosphere. Gary Frank recently, perfect Superman artist. Francis Manapul, the perfect Flash artist. I really think that Billy Tan also just has that knack for drawing Green Lantern. So definitely check out that collection and check out my review. DC has already sent me their free comic book day books. I can't touch on what I thought of them or how I scored them, but I will have reviews posted for their gold title, the New 52 Futures End #0, which is launching their weekly series, which issue #1 ships next week, Wednesday, May 7th. It's a weekly that's going to go up through March 2015, but has some huge ramifications on the DCU as a whole, even though it kind of takes place in a possible future. But I will have reviews of that and their all ages title, which is Teen Titans Go #1. You can pick both those up this Saturday. My reviews for both those titles will be posted this Saturday on darkknightnews.com. As regular, I don't know, is Josh blowing his nose over there, or
Sorry, dog
I don't
sneezing.
know. But as listeners of the show know, I also get stuff and write PR-related stuff for RG Comics. I didn't review anything for them this week, but they have some new titles out as well. We have preview images up on our Facebook page. of 3 titles they shipped this week. There were a couple digests as well as Mega Man number 36, I believe. But I don't know if I'll be reviewing Archie's free comic book day titles because they haven't sent them to me. Who knows? I may pick them up Saturday. But if you want to check out what they have to offer, I posted some news over at Comic Book Movie, and of course the link is on our Facebook page. They have Archie Digest number 1 and a Sonic the Hedgehog Mega Man flip book. Now, if you're a fan of Mega Man titles, you might want to pick that up because it looks to be more of a prelude to a big Mega Man X crossover they have beginning in Mega Man number 37, which ships mid-May sometime. I don't know the exact date, but I'll be picking up my books this Saturday at Back to the Past Collectibles in Redford, Michigan. There's their plug. That's an awesome store. It's actually a warehouse if you're in the area surrounding, Livonia, Redford, and you want to get some comics or haven't checked out the shop, please go. That's just an awesome store. Again, it's a warehouse. Just lots of great comics, collectibles, back issues. They don't just have new stuff there. But who knows? I might pick up a better condition copy of Future's End for myself if I get enough stuff there. But I'm definitely picking up Marvel's Gold Book, which is Guardians of the Galaxy. Granted, I don't give a shit about Guardians of the Galaxy, but I usually tend to pick up Marvel's Gold Book, and there's supposed to be some prelude to Spider-Verse, which is a big Spider-Man event story coming up later this year, so I'm interested to see that. I believe Marvel's All Ages book is Rocket Raccoon, so I'm probably not picking that one up, but there's also a free copy of Bleeding Cool magazine, which I'm probably going to give that a read. I liked last year's free Bleeding Cool magazine, and Bleeding Cool, as Josh knows, is a site that I love to visit too. If you want comic book rumors that you can likely take as gospel, and Josh can attest to this, head to bleedingcool.com, because while their movie rumors might not be as solid, when it comes to rumors, they have some insiders planted in the comic book industry, and yet 90% of the time what you read on Bleeding Cool, it comes true, and we've learned lots of stuff there months in advance, sometimes seasons in advance. Like we knew about the Sinestro title long before that was announced. But I think that's pretty much all I have to say about this week's new comics and free comics. I do have some reviews coming of trades in the coming weeks on Dark Knight News and perhaps Comic Book Movie, but I'm not allowed to talk about anything while I'm under embargo. But anything new you're picking up this week, Josh? Free comic books you're looking forward to, and feel free to plug your shop of choice.
Yeah, I was totally going to. So I actually go to Big Ben's Comics Oasis in Allen Park. They're a great local comic book store. They're actually one of the best in the Downriver area. They've been around since I have been a kid. They've literally been around since I started collecting comics when I was 12 years old. So that's just going over, that's 20 years now. Yeah, I've been collecting comics for 20 years. Wow, I just realized that. It's a long time. They're an excellent store. Big Ben is a great guy. He's the owner over there, and they have an excellent selection. I'm going to go over there Saturday, pick up this week's books. I will also be getting Batman Eternal number 4. I'll probably be picking up a few more books this week. I'm still reading some of last week's titles, issues 30 of Superman and Aquaman and a couple others. The most recent Game of Thrones just came out last week. I'm still haven't finished all of those. And then obviously Walking Dead is still rolling along with its all-out war, big, well, not crossover, but big event. And I'm looking forward to picking up the DC Gold book. I'm actually going to pick up Mouse Guard's Free Comic Book Day book because David Peterson will be at the Motor City Comic Con, so I'll definitely pick that up so I can get that signed by him. I'm a big fan of that series. It's really enjoyable. It's a good all ages title, but if you like fantasy style, medieval stories about knights and chivalry and things like that, and honorable, cool characters. It's about mice. It's just about those other things as well. So it's a really cool title, very well drawn, and he's also a local Michigan voice. So I always try to tout him whenever I can. So I'm looking forward to it. But we're coming up on the hour, so that's pretty much it for me, man. Anything else before we get out of here, Eric?
No, that's it. I'll just give my closing words before I let you sign off for us this week. Yeah, don't forget to check out our Facebook page at facebook.com/a podcast for all seasons. Check out all the links and reviews we told you about in this episode. And if you're just happening across us on YouTube, check out our blog page at multiverseentertainment.wordpress.com. We should be back in a week. I know I'm seeing The Amazing Spider-Man 2 tomorrow. Hopefully Josh gets to see it this weekend so we can give our reviews in our next episode, because we definitely want to do an episode centered around that movie and where the Spider-Man / Sony Marvel Cinematic Universe is going from regular news. We covered the Sony universe in depth in our second episode, but there's been more news in recent weeks, and we're going to touch on that in our Amazing Spider-Man 2 episode. So anyway, check out the pages I just told you about, and we'll see you soon, hopefully. I'll turn it over to you, Josh.
Thanks, Eric. So yeah, thanks for sticking with us. I hope you enjoyed the show today. Sorry for the mini hiatus, but we will be back next week. Do plan on seeing Spider-Man. I don't know if I'll be able to see it this weekend, but probably Monday or Tuesday if I do not see it then. And we'll be talking about that next week. Last thing I was going to quickly tout was we didn't talk about some of the bigger announcements this week. We were more about comic book movies, but huge announcement this week was also Star Wars casting news. However, if you want to check out what I like to refer to as kind of our sister show, the Hump and Bronto Show, which I also guests on week to week, we talked at length about what the Star Wars casting news meant and what we thought about it. You can check out their page over at Facebook/the Hump and Bronto Show, and we talk about that at length. Check us out as well, facebook.com/podcast for all seasons. Thanks for checking us out, and have a good week, guys. We're out of here.